Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Thomas. I will be doing the U.S. History Unit 5 test recording for you today. We do have a test with 31 questions. There will be 29 multiple choice and then 2 short answer. You want to make sure that you're going to be clicking Save Answers as you go, and then at the end click Submit for grading. Just some test reminders here. During the test, read through all the questions carefully as you go. Answer those that you know right away. Make sure that you copy what you're answering on paper as well. This saves your work if you lose it due to a power outage or internet problem. It also records what you put on your first attempt, so when you take the test a second time, you're not making the mistake of putting an incorrect answer the second time as well that you've already attempted. Click Save as you go. Copy and paste any essay responses that you've prepared ahead of time, which is what you should be doing. Your instructor will give you the short answer questions ahead of time to prepare. Review notes for questions that are unfamiliar to you when you go back to the ones that you didn't know. Use the textbook for questions that aren't addressed in the notes, and read over the test one more time before submitting and click Submit. Do not exit the test before you're done. That's just a reminder. You can't get back in. It will use your second attempt if you try to go back in after exiting the test, or you could commit or create a test submission error. All right, so let's get started with your test. The first question, I'm going to read the question and the answer options. First question says, what event resulted from the discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba and the U.S. response to blockade Cuba with its Navy? The Gulf of Tonkin, Watergate, or the Cuban Missile Crisis? Question 2. How did the Cuban Missile Crisis end? An explosion in Caribbean waters scared all nations into limiting nuclear power. The United States agreed that it was up to the Cuban government to allow or not allow the missiles. Or the last option, the Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba and the United States agreed to remove missiles from Turkey. Question 3. President Eisenhower believed that if one Southeast Asian nation fell to communism, more would follow. This was known as the domino theory. What action did he take because of this belief? He sent money and military advisors to South Vietnam. He established an alliance with Japan, China, and Thailand. Or he held a joint planning meeting with the Soviet Union. Question 4. Who was the North Vietnamese communist leader during the Vietnam War? Was it Ngo Dien Diem, Tan Son Nhut, or Ho Chi Minh? Number 5. What gave President Johnson the authority to send additional troops to Vietnam without a formal declaration of war? The election of 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, or Operation Rolling Thunder? Number 6. Who was General William Westmoreland? Was he the Air Force general who led the forces bombing Cambodia, the general who urged President Johnson to withdraw forces and limit U.S. actions in Vietnam, the military commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, or actually that is our last option, the military commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam. All right, number 7. Which was a challenge to U.S. forces in the Vietnam War? Lack of a defined front, lack of modern weaponry, or the last option, a shortage of soldiers? Number 8. Which was not one of the concerns raised by those opposed to the Vietnam War? The U.S. interference in a civil war, draft unfairly targeted poor and working class, or troops unable to engage effectively in guerrilla warfare? Question number 9. What effect did the Vietnam War have on U.S. politics at home? It divided the country politically and led to numerous civilian protests against the war. It united the country behind the policy of containment and U.S. intervention overseas. Or the last option, it brought about a surge of patriotism which resulted in pro-war demonstrations. Number 10. Why did the United States use chemical warfare during the Vietnam War? To destroy the forests so troops could locate the Viet Cong, to kill as many civilians as possible, or to create military bases in which to station forces and supplies? Number 11. What 1968 surprise attack by North Vietnam resulted in less loss of life for South Vietnamese and their U.S. allies, but also a decrease in the support from the American public? Was it the Tet Offensive, Operation Rolling Thunder, or the fall of Saigon? Number 12, what was the American public's reaction to President Nixon's decision to bomb Cambodia? Was it increased support, opened additional debate, or increased opposition? Number 13, what was the final outcome of the Vietnam War? The fall of Saigon and a unified communist nation, establishment of a line of demarcation, the fall of Hanoi, and a unified democracy. Number 14, what was Students for a Democratic Society? A 1960s student organization that opposed the war, a group of congressional interns, a conservative student group of the Republican Party. Number 15, what was a goal of the 1960s counterculture? Rejecting restrictions of accepted authority and traditional values of 1960s society, promoting educational freedom and choice, or earning greater economic stability. Number 16, which event was not related to the anti-Vietnam War movement? The Democratic National Convention violence, the March on Washington, or assassinations of King and Kennedy? And when we say Kennedy here, they could mean Robert Kennedy or JFK. They probably are more likely going towards Robert Kennedy because Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy were assassinated right near one another, within 2 months of one another. Number 17, what is the Equal Rights Amendment? Was it a proposed but unratified amendment to ban sex discrimination, an amendment that protected the rights of all minorities, or an unratified amendment that protected student rights? Number 18, what was one effect of the women's movement on society? An enormous increase in the number of women in the Senate, equality of pay for male and female professional athletes, or an increase in the number of women enrolling in professional schools? Number 19, gays and lesbians, American Indians, and Hispanics all organized to advocate for their civil rights during the 1960s. What inspired them? The women's movement, books promoting their causes, or the African American civil rights movement? Number 20, how did an increase in population among the Hispanic community affect civil rights? They had increased political power, their civil rights were more limited because of increased poverty, or they had less political power because people were more aware of them. Number 21, which Hispanic leader and civil rights advocate founded the National Farm Workers Association to promote rights through nonviolent means? Victor de la Cruz, Juan Coronado, or Cesar Chavez? Number 22, who was the president when the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA for short, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, NOAA, were established? Was it Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, or Gerald Ford? Number 23, what did President Nixon believe would be a benefit of improved relations with the Chinese? The potential for the Chinese vote on the UN Security Council, an increased foreign trade with another capitalist country, or improved relations with the Soviet Union? Number 24, what was détente? An easing of the tense relations between the United States and the Soviet Union, a trade policy established between the United States and the Soviet Union and China, or a plan to share military information with the Soviet Union to equalize the size of their army? Number 25, why did a relatively simple burglary like the break-in at the Watergate turn into a major political scandal and bring down a president? The cover-up involved criminal activities and defiance of legal authority by the President of the United States. The Democrats were the party in power in Congress, so they wanted to remove Nixon. The press was out to get President Nixon, so Woodward and Bernstein wrote an expose of his behavior. Number 26. What was one impact of the Watergate scandal on the nation? People began to question whether the court system would actually work. Most people decided that special elections should be held to replace people who left office early, or people became much more skeptical about politics and less trusting of government. Number 27, what did economists call the period of rising prices and declining employment during the 1970s? Retooling, stagflation, or deflation? Number 28, what was a chief cause of the rising prices in the 1970s? Ineffective government regulation, extremely low unemployment, or the Arab oil embargo? Number 29, what foreign policy problem contributed to Jimmy Carter's defeat in the 1980 election? The Iran hostage crisis, returning the Canal Zone to Panama, or signing the Camp David Accords? Your two short answer questions are as follows. The first one, number 30, we give you the big idea first. As America enters the 1960s and 70s, the Cold War intensifies with war in Asia and the brink of nuclear war in the Caribbean. Demands for equal rights for all Americans will continue. For this question, be sure to give page references for all information. You should only be using your textbook and course slides to answer these questions. All responses should be in complete sentences. Use Unit 5 online course lessons and the textbook pages 828 to 891, chapters 36, 37, and 38. Providing an explanation for U.S. involvement in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Then explain the outcome of both wars. Pages 760 to 762 may also be of an additional help on this question. If you've prepared this question ahead of time, you can copy and paste your response here into the field and make sure to spell check your answer. Question 31 is your character education idea. Our character education trait for Unit 5 was curiosity. Curiosity is taking interest in experience and learning new things for its own sake, finding things fascinating. Thinking about the events and important people in Unit 5, describe one example when curiosity was well demonstrated, or describe a time when you have shown curiosity. If you do not have any personal examples, explain an example from your community. Your example can come from politics, education, business, or your local community. This is the end of your test. Make sure that you go back and reread the questions and revisit anything that you did not know the first time around. Again, always make sure to write down your answers on paper as you go in case you need a backup. Save your answers and then click Submit for grading to make sure that your results reach your instructor in the gradebook successfully. Good luck on your test.